Every law of physics works perfectly in reverse. Film a collision between two billiard balls and play it backwards, still legal. Film a planet orbiting a star and reverse it. No law broken. At the level of electrons, quarks, photons, every fundamental interaction is time-symmetric. The equations don't know which direction is forward. They don't care. So here is the question that should quietly unsettle you. If the laws of physics work identically in both directions, why does the universe only ever run in one? Why do eggs break but never unbreak? Why does a drop of ink spread through water but never spontaneously reconcentrate? Why do you remember yesterday but not tomorrow? Why does every moment feel like it's moving away from you at exactly 1 second per second in exactly one direction with no mechanism to stop or reverse? The answer is not what most people expect. There is no law of physics that mandates forward. No arrow is stitched into the equations. What exists instead is something stranger, a universe born in a state so improbably ordered that disorder became statistically inevitable. And that single fact, that one cosmic accident at the beginning of everything, is the reason time has a direction at all. And it connects, in ways most science communication never reaches, to why time moves at genuinely different rates depending on where in the universe you happen to be standing. Imagine a box divided in half by a partition. On the left, billions of gas molecules bouncing and colliding. On the right, a perfect vacuum. You remove the partition. The gas expands to fill the whole box, always, without exception. Now the question. Can you put the partition back and wait for all the molecules to spontaneously retreat to the left side? Technically, and this is the part that should disturb you, technically, yes. Each individual molecule is moving according to perfectly valid physics. There exists a configuration in which, by chance, every single one of them happens to move left simultaneously. That configuration is not forbidden. It is simply so overwhelmingly, crushingly unlikely that it would essentially never happen across the entire known lifetime of the universe. That is entropy. Not a mystical force, not a cosmic preference for mess. A statement about probability so lopsided it becomes indistinguishable from a law. There are astronomically more ways for a system to be disordered than ordered, not twice as many. Numbers that make a trillion look like a rounding error. So when a system evolves, it statistically tumbles toward disordered states not because nature prefers them, but because there are so many more of them to land in. That tumble has a direction. That direction is what we call the future. In 1872, Ludwig Boltzmann thought he had proved the arrow of time from first principles. His theorem appeared to show mathematically that entropy must always increase. A victory for physics. 4 years later, Joseph Loschmidt destroyed the argument with a single observation. If the microscopic equations of physics are time reversible, and they are, then any valid solution can be run backwards and remain valid. If entropy increases going forward in time in Boltzmann's proof, it must also increase going backward. But that means entropy increases in both directions simultaneously, which means Boltzmann hadn't derived an arrow at all. Boltzmann's eventual response was the answer physics still uses today. The H-theorem does not derive the arrow of time from the laws alone. It derives it from the laws plus an assumption about initial condition. The equations are symmetric. What breaks the symmetry is where the universe started. The arrow of time is not in the rulebook. It is in the history. The universe began in an extraordinarily low entropy state. Improbably, almost incomprehensibly ordered relative to what a random selection from all possible initial conditions would produce. Roger Penrose spent years calculating exactly how improbable his estimate, the probability of the universe starting in a configuration as ordered as the one we observe, out of all possible configurations with the same total energy, roughly 1 in 10 to the power of 10 to the power of 123. This is not a number. It is a description of a quantity so far beyond ordinary astronomical figures that no analogy can touch it. Physicists call this the past hypothesis, the stipulation that the universe began in a low entropy state. David Albert treats it as a brute fact, not derived from anything deeper, simply assumed as an initial condition. Without it, The arrow of time cannot be derived from thermodynamics alone. With it, everything follows. But the hypothesis itself has no explanation. Not yet. Why the Big Bang was so ordered is the deepest open question in the thermodynamics of time. The arrow you feel every morning, that quiet irreversibility, that sense that yesterday is sealed and tomorrow is open, traces all the way back to a mystery at the beginning of the universe that physics has not yet fully answered. Now something that seems unrelated it is. Mass curbs space-time. Einstein showed this in 1915. The consequences that the rate at which your physical processes unfold depends on the depth of your gravitational environment. The closer you are to a massive object, the more space-time curves around you, and the slower your clock ticks relative to a clock far away. This is not a metaphor. It is measured. Precisely. GPS satellites orbit at roughly 20,000 kilometers of altitude. Their atomic clocks, accurate to billionths of a second, tick faster than clocks on the ground because they sit higher in Earth's gravitational field. The difference, about 45 microseconds per day. Engineers correct for that. If they didn't, your navigation would drift by roughly 10 kilometers every single day. The correction is not a theoretical refinement. It is an engineering requirement because the effect is real and does not ask permission. Near the surface of a neutron star, time runs at roughly 70% the rate it does in deep space. At the event horizon of a black hole, the boundary from which nothing escapes, gravitational time dilation becomes, from the perspective of a distant observer, effectively infinite. Mass slows time. This is precise, verified, and not negotiable. Here is where most popular accounts go wrong, and where precision matters. If gravity slows your clock, does it slow your entropy too? The answer requires a distinction that changes everything. In your own reference frame, sitting exactly where you are, in your local region of space. The second law of thermodynamics operates completely normally. Your coffee cooks. Your candle burns down. Entropy increases at exactly the rate you would expect. The second law is a local statement. It holds in every reference frame without exception, including inside a gravitational well. Physics does not give you a thermodynamic discount for proximity to mass. What changes is how your processes appear to an observer far away, from the perspective of someone floating in deep space, watching you through an impossibly precise telescope. Every physical process near you appears to unfold at a reduced rate. Your coffee takes longer to cool, not because cooling has slowed in your frame, but because their clock and your clock disagree on elapsed time. The time you actually experience, proper time, runs normally. The time a distant observer assigns to your region, coordinate time, runs slower. These are not the same thing. Here is the deeper irony. At cosmic scales, gravity is one of the most powerful entropy-generating mechanisms in the universe. Gravitational collapse. Gas clouds compressing into stars, stars collapsing into neutron stars, generates enormous entropy increases. A black hole is not a low-entropy structure. It is the highest entropy configuration any region of space-time can contain. Gravity, far from slowing entropy, drives some of the most dramatic entropy production in the cosmos. The arrow of time still points the same direction everywhere. What time dilation changes is the rate at which different observers measure that arrow progressing, not the direction and not the local physics. A black hole is the endpoint of gravitational collapse, a region where mass has concentrated until the escape velocity equals the speed of light. Nothing exits. Not light, not radiation, not information. From outside, watching a clock fall toward a black hole, you would see it slow as it approaches the event horizon. And slow, and never quite cross. The image dims and redshifts across billions of years. From inside the falling clock's frame, crossing takes a moment. Two observers, two genuinely different measurements of time, both correct within their own reference frames. The thermodynamics of black holes is not a mystery. In the early 1970s, Jacob Bekenstein proposed that a black hole must carry entropy proportional to the surface area of its event horizon, not its volume. This was radical. Every other system's entropy scales with volume. Stephen Hawking derived the precise formula. S equals Ka for sesto, where A is the event horizon area, K is Boltzmann's constant, and h is the Planck length. This is the Bekenstein-Hawking formula, one of the most important results at the intersection of general relativity and quantum mechanics. What it tells you: a black hole is the maximum entropy object. No configuration of matter within a given region of space can contain more entropy than a black hole filling that region. Hawking also showed that black holes slowly radiate energy through quantum effects at the event horizon, Hawking radiation. As they radiate, they lose mass and entropy flows back into the universe. Even the most extreme objects in the cosmos obey the arrow. The universe makes no exception. One real-world anchor, and a precision that most popular accounts miss. Muons are subatomic particles created about 15 kilometers up in Earth's atmosphere by cosmic ray collisions. They are unstable, decaying in about 2.2 microseconds on average. Classical physics predicts they should decay long before reaching the ground. The distance is too great, the lifetime too short, but they arrive at the surface in enormous numbers, counted continuously by detectors worldwide. The reason is time dilation, but specifically velocity time dilation from special relativity, not gravitational time dilation from general relativity. These are distinct effects with different origins. At speeds close to light, a moving object's internal clock runs slower relative to a stationary observer. From our ground-based frame, the muon's 2.2 microsecond lifetime is extended by a factor of several times, enough to survive the trip. From the muon's frame, the atmosphere is Lorentz contracted, and the distance is shorter. GPS satellites require correction for both effects simultaneously. Being higher in Earth's gravitational field makes their clocks run faster, GR effect, while their orbital velocity makes clocks run slower, SR effect. The gravitational effect dominates, roughly 45 microseconds per day, but both are real, both are measured, and both must be accounted for. Time is not above the universe. It is inside it, subject to geometry, subject to motion, shaped by both. Life is, thermodynamically speaking, an anomaly, not a violation. Never a violation, but a local, temporary, improbably sustained reduction of entropy. A single living cell contains a structure of such staggering complexity that the number of possible molecular configurations it is not in vastly exceeds the number it is in. And yet here it is. Here you are. Life maintains low entropy locally by exporting disorder outward. You consume organized chemical energy, food, and radiate heat. Exhaled gases, waste. Your body continuously increases the disorder of the surrounding universe while maintaining its own improbable internal order. You are not cheating the second law. You are obeying it at a cost. Every second you remain alive. You exist only because the universe is still far from its final equilibrium, still carrying enough low-entropy fuel in the form of starlight and chemical gradients to sustain the extraordinary accident of organized matter that wonders about its own existence. The universe began in a configuration so improbably ordered that the only statistically available future was disorder. That movement from that impossible beginning toward equilibrium is what we call time. The asymmetry between past and future is not a law written into physics. It is a consequence of history, traced back to an initial condition that physics has not yet fully explained. Mass curves space-time, and the depth of that curvature sets the rate at which all processes unfold as measured by distant observers. Local thermodynamics is unaffected. The second law holds everywhere, without exception. What changes between gravitational altitudes is only the comparison of clocks, not the physics happening at any one location. Black holes are not the universe hiding disorder. They are the universe reaching maximum disorder for a given collection of mass. Entropy does not stop at the event horizon, and you, a structure of improbable order on the surface of a planet, your clock ticking fractionally slower than one in open space, are not cheating the universe. You are one of its most precise expressions. Entropy temporarily organized into something complex enough to ask why. The arrow of time does not move because something pushes it. It moves because the universe has nowhere else to go, and the initial conditions that gave it a direction were set once at the beginning of everything, in a moment of order so extreme that physics still has no full account of how it happened. That is the honest answer, not clean, not complete, but true.